Mary stood on trembling legs as she watched the life drain out of her beloved son. How could this be? She watched him raggedly draw his final breath, and she cried out in distress. Her life flashed before her eyes, don't you think? Remembering so very long ago as a young, innocent girl in Nazareth, stars in her eyes, her heart full of dreams, about to be wed, when a mighty angel appeared to her. Favoured woman, he had called her. Her heart had just been wrenched out of her chest. Her favoured? She had just watched her perfect, innocent son tortured, beaten, bloodied. She'd been blessed. No mother ever wants to outlive their child, especially not one destined for such great things. I can see it now. John, the beloved disciple, gently putting his arm around Mary to support and to comfort her. Pushing down his own grief, his own horror, so he can be there for his master's mother. While hanging on the cross, in agony, Jesus looked down with compassion in his eyes. He saw the woman that had done his Father's will for 34 years, and he said, "Look, here is your son." Then he turned to John and he said, "Look, here is your mother." You could be forgiven for thinking that everybody had turned away from Jesus. The mocking, the flogging, the taunting, the yelling. But not all had turned away. Crowds of people in the midst of the chaos saw what had happened and was upset. Women that had provided for Jesus during his ministry stood watching everything. Friends watched from a distance. Even an army officer who stood in front of the cross when Jesus was executed said, "Surely this man was innocent." I reckon the Jewish leaders felt pretty smug about now. Their plan had been accomplished. They could now work on oppressing the Jewish people again to get them back under their control. Little did they know that the mayhem was just beginning for them. At Jesus' death, at the exact hour of the evening sacrifice, as the priest lifted the knife to slay the lamb, the curtain in the temple that separated the most holy place from the rest of the temple, the place where even the high priest was only able to go once a year, was ripped from top to bottom by an unseen hand. The most holy place, once the most sacred place on the whole entire earth, now holding no significance. The sacrifice that the whole world had been waiting for 3,500 years had happened in their midst and by their own hand. With his dying breath, with his last call out into the multitude, his last correspondence with his Father, Jesus said, "It is finished." Then a great earthquake shook the world. There was great upheaval of mountains, rocks broken like clay jars, people strewn to the ground with violent tremors, tombs wrenched open, all of creation crying out at the murder of the Creator. How do you think the Jewish leaders felt about now? Not everyone was distracted by these most fearful and unusual events. There was a Jewish leader, Joseph, that out of fear followed Jesus secretly. He gently and tenderly removed Jesus' battered, bruised, broken and lifeless body from the cruel cross. And he laid it in a brand new tomb. The women, out of love, watched where he was laid. What else could they do but watch? Have you ever thought about the connection between creation and Jesus' death? Let me tell you, right back at the beginning, Jesus had completed all his creation. We are told on the seventh day, he stopped all the work that he was doing and he set the day apart as holy. God rested on the seventh day. Here, Jesus had finished all his redemptive work. What day did he rest? The seventh day, the Sabbath. Does that blow your mind or what? The Sabbath was not instituted with the 10 Commandments. It started right back the very first week of creation. Does it matter what day we keep holy? Oh, yes, it does. What does the fourth commandment say? Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. And even Jesus, in death, kept the Sabbath holy by resting. What an unforgettable Sabbath this one was turning out to be. Jesus was lying lifeless on a hard, cold stone slab. The disciples were hiding for fear of what might happen to them. Can you imagine their hopes extinguished, their souls crushed? The future seemed dark and foreboding. Can you hear them combing through every word and every phrase that Jesus ever said while he was with them, trying desperately to find some clue as to why this happened, some reason to keep on living? The priests and religious leaders going through the duties as they did every Sabbath, but a strangeness pervading their every action. People coming to ask what had happened, what repercussions were going to come back to them when word got around what they had done to Jesus, that they were the ones that put Jesus to death. You can imagine many people running home and opening their scrolls to read the prophecies surrounding Jesus' death. The penny dropping, seeing the one that had been crucified as the Redeemer of the world. Even some of the Jewish leaders, in the secrecy of their own home, opened the scrolls to study the prophecies and saw for the first time Jesus as light of the world. And the women sat at the tomb of Jesus, their beloved Redeemer, and waited. What do you think they were doing? Do you think they were weeping? Or do you think their grief was so deep they couldn't weep? Do you think they were talking about the good old days? Or do you think they were too pained to talk? What we do know is that they were sitting opposite the tomb and waiting. They were keeping watch while their Saviour rested on his Sabbath. This Sabbath, why don't you pore over the prophecies in our scroll, the Bible, and see for yourself why so many people were convinced that Jesus is Lord. Will you remember to rest this Sabbath as Jesus did all throughout his ministry and even in his death? Will you watch and wait with me and let the truths of the Bible sing through your veins?